Witnesses knew then that Clinton's campaign chairman, John Podesta, whose emails were released several months later, had already been targeted. Witnesses were also asked if Trump was advised to make the statement about Clinton's emails from someone outside his campaign, and if the witnesses had reason to believe that Trump tried to coordinate the release of the Democratic National Committee emails to do the most damage to Clinton. According to multiple people familiar with the investigation, the special counsel is looking into possible coordination between WikiLeaks and Trump associates in disseminating the emails. The counsel wants to know the role Republican operative and longtime Donald Trump associate Roger Stone played and Stone's relationship to WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange. Quote, they wanted to see if there was a scheme. Was Stone working on the side for Trump? After he officially left the campaign, one person interviewed by the special counsel's office said, adding that it seemed investigators wanted to know, was this a big plot? For his part, Donald Trump mentioned WikiLeaks 145 times in the last month of the campaign.
WikiLeaks, I love WikiLeaks.
This WikiLeaks stuff is unbelievable. It tells you the inner heart. You got to read it.
It's been amazing what's coming out on WikiLeaks.
And another one came in today. This WikiLeaks is like a treasure trove.
Getting off the plane, they were just announcing new WikiLeaks, and I wanted to stay there, but I didn't want to keep you waiting.
Boy, I love reading those WikiLeaks.
Also tonight, the Washington Post is reporting that Mueller's team is investigating Donald Trump's efforts to oust his Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, last summer, and whether those efforts were part of a months-long pattern of attempted obstruction of justice. During the discussion now, Matt Miller, former spokesperson for Attorney General Eric Holder, and Betsy Woodruff, a politics reporter for the Daily Beast. Both are MSNBC contributors. And Matt, I just want to go to that last item first about the possible obstruction of justice with the president trying to fire Jeff Sessions. And we saw the president attacking Jeff Sessions today in a tweet, once again, seeming to resume that.
Yeah, if you look at the tweet today and you look at this story about Mueller looking at his interactions with Sessions dating back to last year, I think you have to think about it in this pattern of activity of the president's inappropriate interactions with the Justice Department, his inappropriate interactions with Jim Comey, his inappropriate interactions with Andy McCabe, with Jeff Sessions, with Rod Rosenstein. And I think Robert Mueller is most likely looking at all of those and trying to figure out what was the president's motive. We know it sometimes he was trying to shut down the investigation. That was clear in his conversations with Jim Comey, and that seems to be why he fired Jim Comey, at least if you believe his own words. And so I think Mueller will try to connect that early behavior with what he was doing over last summer when he was trying to push Sessions out the door, as well as, don't forget, a few weeks ago it was reported that he's also investigating the question of whether the president tried to fire Mueller himself as another way to obstruct the investigation. You put all of these together and it starts to look like a pattern.
Is reporting, and one had nothing to do with the other. But that is the problem when you don't divest. That is the problem when you have these kinds of financial entanglements. It is the appearance of, frankly, corruption. And that's why we have previous administrations who have been very, very stringent about divesting themselves of these kinds of relationships and making sure, or at the very least, making sure they don't take a meeting with someone who might have a financial relationship later on with one of their business interests. So entirely predictable, and another sort of nail in the coffin. He's had a very, very difficult month, and to me, it's very difficult to see how he remains in that job without a top secret clearance, with Mueller breathing down his neck, and with increasing stories about financial entanglements that are making his job very difficult.
Josh, I want to read this graph. It's from the Post story. It says, behind the scenes, Trump has derisively referred to Sessions as Mr. Magoo, a cartoon character who is elderly, myopic, and bumbling, according to people with whom he has spoken. Trump has told associates that he has hired the best lawyers for his entire life, but is stuck with Sessions, who is not defending him and is not sufficiently loyal. What do you make of that comparison, the president feeling like Sessions isn't being sufficiently loyal? It's another loyalty oath, right?
Right. It says to me he doesn't understand the role of Attorney General and the Attorney General's relationship to the president. Jeff Sessions is
job is not to be Donald Trump's personal lawyer. And I don't think Trump has ever reconciled himself to that fact or wants to. He sees the job of Jeff Sessions as to go out there and to defend him, to investigate and attack his enemies. He tweeted just today that why isn't Jeff Sessions having Justice Department lawyers go out and investigate Hillary Clinton, who hasn't been a political figure in 18 months and isn't going to be one. This is just, loyalty is the lens through which he views everything, but especially lawyers. I've got to get to the gun thing, okay? Because today was meant to focus on President's Roundtable with lawmakers, focusing on gun control. They even canceled a briefing to highlight it. But once again, the White House steps all over their own message with this resignation. Do you think this is another self-inflicted wound, April?
Yes, but even more so than that, I'm waiting to hear what the NRA has to say. This is the first time in modern years, in the most recent presidents that we've seen, for a Republican president to not stand in lockstep with the NRA. It was very strong today. The president said he wanted something stronger than weaker. He was talking about issues of background checks, mental health. He was doubling down again on certifying those who can handle a gun in schools. I mean, he really went in. And the question is that will the NRA go against this Republican president? I mean, they've talked about many years before with Democratic presidents when they were talking about the gun show loophole issue and different things, that they're trying to take your guns away. Well, now this president, this Republican president, who just became Republican not long ago, the last couple of years, is now saying we need to do something. He even said he had dinner or lunch with members of the NRA about this. So, I mean, yeah, this Hope Hicks issue is a big issue for the moment, but I think this has more tentacles and a longer battle, if you will, to come.
Yeah. My mouth dropped when he said take the guns and then due process. And I said, wait a minute, did he just say, yep, I'm going to take your guns away, which he said about Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama, which, by the way, Barack Obama never, there was no legislation, nothing to ever say.
Well, he, in fact, said, Barack Obama said, I have no interest in coming to your house to take your guns away.
I was like,
you and every Republican lawmaker in the room, Don, in terms of your jaw dropping. Look, in watching it, I just couldn't escape the Tuesday immigration open meeting that we saw where Donald Trump essentially said, in his own unique way, we can do comprehensive immigration reform. By Thursday, 48 hours later, that was off the table and they weren't doing anything. What he says in an open setting, he is not someone with a lot of deeply held beliefs. Yes. He doesn't care that what he says.
He'll say that today, he'll say that today, but then he'll say something else and he won't on Thursday or Friday. Right? But today I kept thinking as I'm watching this, honestly, our lawmakers are completely out of touch with what the American people really want. Especially these kids, many of them, with these kids, a lot of them are older. The younger generation, I think they're not part of, they don't really sort of get it. And just about how little this president knows about everything. We want something powerful, we want something big, we want something strong, instead of coming up with details. Because I'd left that not knowing how he felt specifically about anything. I saw this as performance art today.
If you need to understand, you need to understand what the Republican Party's reaction to Donald Trump, broadly speaking, is, I would urge anyone to go find the video of John Cornyn, the Texas Republican senator, sitting next to Donald Trump. Yeah. John Cornyn's face tells it all. He looks like this half time. Yeah. Like, I hear that right? I mean, that's just the reality. And that's what Trump, the great opportunity Trump represented in some ways. The break with the orthodoxy, the break with the ways in which things used to be. The problem is you have no idea whether he's going to do it.
The difference is when you have
But wait a minute, Don, he says he wants to deal with bump stocks. He says he wants to deal with bump stocks. He says he's going to write some kind of executive order to deal with bump stocks. He wants them to deal with everything else. It sure could have, but I'm just saying, I'm not taking up for him, but he says he wants to deal with the issue of bump stocks. He's going to do that right away, and the rest of that the congressional leaders can handle. He didn't understand a lot of the legislation, but he says he wants some action. So we'll see what what happens and how long this bump stock thing will take.
All right, I'm going to get Bump out of here if you guys don't hold your horses. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. When we come back with all this chaos swirling in the White House, how does the administration get anything done? Is there agenda on the line? I'm going to ask Mark McKinnon right after this. For the exits, Hicks announcing her departure just one day after admitting she told lies, what she characterized as white lies, but lies nonetheless, in the service of President Trump. A source telling CNN's Aaron Burnett that Trump berated Hicks for admitting she had lied and asked her how she could be so stupid. And there's more news from inside this chaotic White House. Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law, his senior advisor, reportedly got big loans for his family business after he met with top Wall Street executives at the White House. That's according to the New York Times. Kushner also described as acting paranoid. A CNN source says Kushner feels everyone is out to get him after losing his top secret security clearance and in the middle of his pitched battle with Chief of Staff John Kelly. A White House insider saying the president is increasingly frustrated with all the enemies General Kelly is making. And there's also the latest crisis of the president's own making, his public shaming of his own hand-picked attorney general. The president tweeting today, why is AG Jeff Sessions asking the inspector general to investigate potentially massive FISA abuse? Will take forever, has no prosecutorial power, and already late with reports on Comey, etc. Isn't the IG an Obama guy? Why not use Justice Department lawyers? Disgraceful. So to answer the president's questions, the inspector general, Michael Horowitz, is investigating because that's his job. And none of this is really what the president is steamed about. That's not what he's steamed about. That's not what he's mad about. He continues to blame Jeff Sessions for the Mueller investigation. And now tonight, we have learned Mueller is looking into exactly why Trump wanted to oust Sessions last summer. And here we go again. News that on any other night would be our top story. President Trump holds a live, televised meeting on guns with Republicans and Democrats and ends up sounding an awful lot like a Democrat, calling for a ban on bump stocks, strengthening background checks, and raising the age of gun purchases from 18 to 21. Remember when gun advocates love to say, they still love to say that Obama wants to take away your guns. Now Trump actually does. Listen.
Take the firearms first and then go to court. A lot of times by the time you go to court, it takes so long to go to court to get the due process procedures. I like taking the guns early.
So a recap just on the open of this show. Bombshell resignations, White House infighting, guns, all of that, and it's only Wednesday. So let's bring in now CNN senior White House correspondent Jeff Zeleny. Jeff, so let's see, where do we start? The White House under a barrage of bad headlines tonight. What's the latest?
Don, certainly a busy day on a variety of fronts here at the White House, as you covered there. I mean, there was this dramatic session in the cabinet room of the White House this afternoon that seemed to really be the driving story of the day here, if you will, with the president having this session with Democrats and Republicans sitting down trying to broker a deal on guns. He said, do not be petrified by the NRA. He said that now is the time to do something. Literally minutes after that meeting broke up, news came from the White House that Hope Hicks, the communications director, one of the closest advisors to the president, said she was resigning. So, of course, that in some ways overshadowed that entire NRA meeting. Again, this morning, the president going after his attorney general, Jeff Sessions, once again, which has become this repeated sort of series of events here, always going after Jeff Sessions, who was, of course, an early supporter, early advisor on the campaign. So, Don, as we end a busy Wednesday here, the White House still pushing guns, but there is this staff shakeup, this resignation that really is different than all the others. We've been through this before. We've been here before saying this person resigned, that person resigned. Hope Hicks is different, Don. Yeah.
But who has five communications directors in just over a year? I mean, I hate to laugh. It's laughable. I just cannot. Who can believe this?
Right. But, Don, it's even more than that. Yes, she had the title of communications director, but it is much more than that. Hope Hicks was more than the communications director. Right. She was the Trump
member of the family.
Whisperer. She understood him, and she, in many respects, her voice was not known outside. You know, we see a lot of people on Sunday talk shows. We see them advising, presidents and sort of, out here on the lawn giving interviews. This was not Hope Hicks, but her voice inside was very loud and very clear. Mm-hmm. She was involved in virtually every big story. The president was involved in every big speech. She traveled with him. And, Don, I'm remembering tonight thinking back to a trip last July when the president was flying back from Hamburg, Germany, the G20, back here to Washington. Hope Hicks was on that plane. I was on that plane as a pool reporter after this long foreign trip, and that was the time, we didn't know it at the moment, where they were devising the communication strategy for that Trump Tower meeting from 2016. Hope Hicks was in the room as they were talking about, wait, this wasn't about adoptions for Russia, it was about dirt on Hillary Clinton. So that, I was thinking about that again today, Don. Hope Hicks was present for every station of this situation, which is one of the reasons she spent 8 hours yesterday, of course, before the House Intelligence Committee. She spent 2 days before Bob Mueller's team at the end of last year. So all that builds up to, is it why she resigned today? We don't know. She said she wanted to pursue other opportunities. But, Don, I can tell you there was a ripple effect that was felt here. I was told that people were crying when she was saying that she was leaving. She is a force here in the White House that will be leaving in the coming weeks. And my question, how will the president deal without his aide next to him? He can call out hope, hope. For all these variety of things. So this was a bigger deal than a lot of resignations.
Without his Trump whisperer, again, as
it was, and true.
She is called. Thank you. I appreciate that. I want to bring in now Chris Cillizza, CNN politics editor at large, Joshua Green, CNN political analyst and the author of Devil's Bargain, Steve Bannon, Donald Trump, and the Storming of the Presidency, and CNN political analysts April Ryan and Ryan Lizza. So, Chris, it's interesting when he talks about her being the Trump whisperer, that she's been there for him. She was very low-key. I remember inauguration night was the first time I'd ever met her and really heard her name, besides maybe reading it on a statement from the White House. She was not very visible. And so you don't know Hope Hicks? I said, no, I don't know Hope Hicks. But you're not buying her resignation, are you?
Well, to your first point about her low profile, to go from Anthony Scaramucci to Hope Hicks is literally the biggest contrast in profile you could ever possibly have. But no. Jeff touched on this. She said she told Maggie Haberman, or aides told Maggie Haberman in the New York Times that she left because this was the perfect time to leave. It's the it's the opposite of the perfect time to leave. You just went through the number of stories, Don. That's just today. And really, that's just this afternoon.
Yeah, because yesterday, a similar open to the show, there was so much news. It was like 4 or 5 stories, either of which could have been the big story or the only story we covered.
And would have been in any other administration. So, to me, her leaving now, a day after the testimony in the House Intelligence Committee, a few weeks after the whole security clearances issue with Rob Porter, who she was romantically linked. She is leaving at a time, and Jeff noted this, she's leaving at a time when Donald Trump is increasingly isolated, has fewer and fewer of that core group that he started with.
Well, let me ask you this. But then why then would he berate her after her testimony? Because she said she told white lies. And I like to say, hashtag, that was trending today, hashtag white lies matter, because they do really matter.
Well, if you lie about little things, you know how that ends, right? I mean, yes. My guess is because he was upset at her because he is smart enough to understand that it is very hard for a communications person whose job ostensibly is to deal with the media to be saying, well, yeah, I mean, I tell some things that aren't true. It's nothing substantive, nothing important.
How do we know what to believe?
Credibility-wise, you're left in a lurch there, and my guess is he sensed that.
But he also, Trump himself adheres to the Roy Cohn standard of, always attack, never admit any wrongdoing. Trump himself will never admit that he's lied, never apologize, and I think he expects that from his staff too.
Yeah. April, this is your beat. What are you hearing?
Well, I'm hearing she was forced to resign. That she and General Kelly, no surprise, that she and General Kelly have not been seeing eye to eye, particularly since this Rob Porter issue, when she wrote that statement about Rob Porter and his leaving and what was going on. And my sources are telling me that she delivered a tentative resignation at that time, but they said stay. You've got some more things you've got to do. You've got these hearings, so stay. But yesterday was the nail in the coffin. That white lie was the nail in the coffin for this president and for the administration. So what's next, we don't know, but we do know that this White House is trying to act like everything is okay. We know that everything is not okay because they knew this was coming. They purposefully, strategically canceled a briefing today because they were fearful that we would get information about this and start talking about it to overshadow the gun issue, the other story, well, one of the other stories of the day. So this has been a very interesting day, and we have to see how it plays out. But Hope Hicks is leaving, but the president has other people in the administration that he could definitely have as a whisperer. I mean, I've said it before. Kellyanne, when the president gets in hot water on the Twitter, Kellyanne says, "Sir, how can I help you?" Meaning, how can I help you fix this? So, the president, he likes people 1 minute. But once they do something, he'll throw them away for a minute. But then they start calling him on his cell phone, and they're friends again. But, we'll see what happens. But this one was a hard blow.
How do you fix that? Because, one of the people you mentioned, and there are others, they're so gaffe-prone that how do you fix something? Sometimes they try to fix it, and they end up making it worse. At least Hope Hicks was not enamored by
yeah,
cameras and fame.
Right.
She was the perfect communications director. Everyone else who seems to be in those roles want to be. They never met a green room they didn't like. They never. The roughest place, the most dangerous place to be was between them and a camera. Even still, so I don't know how they're going to fix it, because they often end up making it worse.
She's now sick of Washington.
Yeah.
She's now sick of Washington because she's been the eye of the storm at least 3 times.
Yeah, and so young. This is not what she signed up for. She signed up originally to work with Ivanka Trump on her fashion line. Let me bring Ryan in. Ryan, remember the New York Times reporting last year where President Trump lashed out at John Kelly, and Kelly told other White House staff that in his 35 years of military service, he had never been spoken to like that. And we have seen this story before, but this time it looks like it's a dramatic consequence.
Well, I mean, sometimes it feels like half of White House reporting is just about who Trump is mad at that day, right? Every senior White House official goes through some cycle of, Trump venting at them. So that was, that was Kelly's time in the barrel. This job of White House communications director, it's sort of become like the drummer in Spinal Tap, if you guys remember that movie. I mean, people just sort of leave in sort of unusual circumstances, some more spectacularly than others.
Self-combust.
Scaramucci's was probably the most spectacular. He was a sort of the shortest and maybe more like that, sort of like the drummer who self-combusted in the movie. Hope lasted a long time. I mean, she was doing this job even when other people had the title. But at the end of the day, Trump is his own communications director, and that's, I think, why this job is so impossible to fill in the way that previous presidents have had communications directors, because he's very difficult to work for in any capacity, but especially when it comes to press and communications, which he thinks he is a master of.
Yeah. But just, Josh, don't you look at this graphic. This is the president's original inner circle that went with him from the early days of the campaign to the White House. Actually, there were just a couple from the early days. Some of those people are not early. I mean, but anyway, how many are left here? The president is increasingly isolated.
Well, if you take away family members, there's not a whole lot of people left from the early days. And the real shock, I think, with Hope Hicks leaving, I was speaking to a former White House official today, just after the news broke, who said he was really stunned. He said, as tough as that job is on people, I expected Hope to be the one to turn out the lights on the Trump administration, that she would be there for the full 4 or 8 years. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't know if that was realistic, but I think it speaks to how jarring it was for people who work with her to see her, kind of arbitrarily decide to leave, especially in the middle of all the crises that are ongoing. The other issue that came up in my reporting was, look, she's spoken to Mueller. Maybe that's a reason she's left. If she has reason to believe that perhaps she is a target of this investigation, maybe now is a time to leave and get some distance from the White House if things are going to go in a bad direction.
Hey, Chris, I got to take a break, but quickly, and how much of this, I was sitting in my office and I was watching all of the news channels, right? Trump TV, or state-run TV, they're not even reporting this. So the Trump supporters, they don't even know about these stories. It doesn't even register. That's the amazing thing. We cover all of these things every day. The White House imploding behind him, and he's standing there going, nothing to see here. But his supporters probably don't even realize the extent of it.
Yes, there's no question. Particularly when he tweets about, why don't we pay attention to Hillary's crimes, number one. Number two, though, I actually think for people who are just consuming news generally, the top of the show, Don, I would think there's an episode of The Simpsons where Mr. Burns, the old, sort of decrepit guy, just stay with me, the old decrepit guy goes to the doctor, and he said that he has a checkup, and the doctor comes in and says, you're actually perfectly fine. He says, I knew it, I was healthy. And the doctor says, no, it's not that. You have every disease known to man, but they're all blocking one another from attacking your body. I sometimes think about that with the news cycle. I don't know if he's doing it on purpose or not. Some people say, oh, of course he's doing it on purpose. It's 8-dimensional chess. I don't know if that's true, but I do know that, like, Ben Carson and the stuff going on with the furniture in his office. Jared Kushner. We're talking about Hope Hicks, but the Russia investigation. I mean, there's so much. You could literally do an entire show on just the guns.
Well, hang on, because you guys are coming back. Okay, so stand by. Don't work ahead in the textbook.
I used a lot of time there. Sorry,
oh, my gosh. We'll be back. We got to talk about all that stuff that he mentioned. Don't go anywhere.
CNN Tonight, brought to you by Voya Financial, helping you to and through retirement.
Said it will no longer sell guns and ammunition to anyone under the age of 21. It also said it was removing all toys and air rifles that resemble assault weapons. In a statement, Walmart says, and I'm quoting, "Our heritage as a company has always been in serving sportsmen and hunters, and we will continue to do so in a responsible way." Of course, this follows a decision by another big retailer, Dick's Sporting Goods, the company doing what Walmart did in 2015, immediately ending sales of all assault-style weapons like the one used in Parkland and so many other mass shootings. So whatever happens next in Congress, what happened today in the marketplace says a lot. Thanks very much for watching 360. It's time to hand things over to Don Lemon. I'll see you tomorrow night at 8 o'clock. CNN Tonight starts right now.
This is CNN Tonight. I'm Don Lemon. Breaking news tonight out of Washington. We're following multiple huge stories tonight, and we're going to catch you up on everything. And it's a lot, so buckle up. First, there's Hope Hicks. The
positions on gun control that have been largely opposed by members of his own party. Democratic Senator Amy Klobuchar was in the room. I talked to her earlier.
The states that have these background checks.
I mean, it was pretty extraordinary. I wonder, first of all, what were your key takeaways from it?
Well, first of all, it felt like something of a real discussion, and that was important. Secondly, the president clearly committed to a strong background check bill, a strong universal background check bill. And he said he didn't want a weak bill. It's clear he wanted to close the gun show loophole, that he wanted to do something about background checks. And of course, many of my colleagues that have been through the immigration debate in the last few weeks have seen him say one thing and the next day say another. So we have to hold him to this because the American people are very focused on this now. Young people going to march in the streets. And if we do nothing after he has said this, I don't think that's going to work very well for him. And so we had that discussion. He agreed to include my bill on domestic violence, which is a very simple bill that's now passed in 12 states that makes sure that if people are dating each other and there's been an act of domestic violence and a conviction, that you can't get a gun there. So I thought it was really interesting, and probably, I'm sure you agree, the most interesting part was when he was taking on members of his own party and basically telling them that he wanted to get something done.
The president pushed, as you said, for a larger comprehensive bill. That was his word. I mean, is that a wise approach in your opinion? Because your colleague, Senator Rubio, told CNN after the meeting that it's ideal if you could do it all at once, but, quote, I just don't think it's likely to pass knowing this place.
He can say that all he wants, but then he's going to have to face all those kids in Florida and really people all over the country, because I've seen this before. For a long time, the moms have been taking the torch and valiantly tried to change this. After Sandy Hook, you saw the parents and the mothers. It's different when kids take it over, this is my impression. So if our Republican colleagues are going to be saying, well, we just want to do something really small just to respond, I don't think that's going to work. And they are talking to me about things like assault weapons, and they're talking about the background check that the president said he'd support today, things like closing the terrorist loophole, domestic violence. So I think that's why the president was referring to a more comprehensive bill. And as I said, I'm from a proud hunting state, and I look at every proposal and I say, would this hurt my Uncle Dick in his deer stand? And I don't think any of these rational proposals that we've been discussing would do that.
You mentioned the immigration meeting that the president held back in January, and it was sort of a similar format. There was a feeling that things might really change after that, because at some point he seemed to side with Democrats, and then Republicans would speak and he'd sort of go back to their position and then go back to the Democratic position. Things haven't changed since that immigration meeting. Both sides retreated to their partisan corners.
That is my worst fear. It's everyone's worst fear, but we are where we are. And I think one difference is that he has made this really clear 10 times that he wanted a strong universal background check bill. And the American people saw him do that. He, unlike other cases where he said, oh, I want to add this to immigration, I want to add that, he actually specifically said to Steve Scalise, who he said he loved, that he didn't think we should be adding a bill that would have actually expanded access to guns. And he specifically said that to him, and he said, well, that's because Amy and Diane wouldn't support it. That happened. So that does feel different to me than how he's handled the immigration debate. But again, I'm not naive here. It could easily happen, but it won't happen if the American people hold him to what he said today.
Senator Klobuchar, appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, coming up next, even more breaking news on guns from the biggest retailer in the country.
Last night took an L, but tonight I bounce back.
What's an L?
The rap singer took a loss.
A campaign to obstruct justice. That's one of the things, according to a new report in the Washington Post, that Robert Mueller is looking into. Kerry, if in fact the Mueller team is looking into this, and frankly, I think there's a lot of things the Mueller team is asking questions about, and I think Bob Woodward made this point in the last hour. Doesn't necessarily mean there's any there, or that's a particular focus of theirs. They just need to, in 8-hour, 10-hour interview, there's a lot of boxes to check off.
There's a lot that they need to. They're conducting an investigation, and so they're going to ask a lot of questions. Now, I do think that they're asking questions about Sessions and his efforts to all the pressure that he has placed on the Attorney General. It could be part of an obstruction case. The obstruction case is not just limited to one event. So, for example, it's not just limited to the fact that he fired Director Comey. It is a pattern of activity that he engaged in from the start of when he came into office of putting pressure, particularly on the Justice Department, particularly on individuals who were involved in the investigation prior to Director Comey leaving and the special counsel being appointed and after. But he's gone after Rosenstein, the Deputy Attorney General, the Attorney General. He has consistently gone after individuals who he believes are in charge of this investigation. And it is consistent, it is deliberate, and it is his effort because he doesn't understand and doesn't respect the independence of the Justice Department.
But if he wanted to fire the Attorney General, he could fire the Attorney General.
He could fire the Attorney General, although then he would have to appoint somebody new, nominate somebody new, who then would have to go to a Senate confirmation. Right, the Attorney General so far has, I think, tried to walk a certain line on certain decisions. He has done the absolute right thing, for example, recusing himself from the Russia investigation. But the president consistently goes after the Attorney General, goes after anybody that he thinks is administering justice in a way that is different than what is in his own political interest.
But if it was obstruction of justice, then what it would be is not a tweet out to the public, which is we've just discussed, is his communications device, right? What he's saying is, I'm frustrated because I actually can't control the Justice Department. Obstruction of justice would be controlling the Justice Department. It would be calling Jeff Sessions on the phone and saying, stop this investigation. That would be, or don't testify. Tell people not to testify to Mueller about what's going on.
He made phone calls to members of Congress. He had the director of the FBI in front of him and said, can't you make this investigation go away?
So
he did that too.
Not true. Members of Congress are in the legislative branch, okay? They have oversight over the executive branch. You can't have obstruction of justice when the executive asks the legislative branch to do something.
Right, but according to the reporting, he did call up Don McGahn and ask him to fire.
This story is Mueller looking at obstruction because he bitches and complains about what Jeff Sessions is doing publicly? That's absurd. Maybe he's looking into it, but to me, I'm obviously not a lawyer. But it is crazy for me to think that the President of the United States, who could fire the Attorney General or anyone he wants to fire in the Justice Department, isn't firing them, is admitting, you know what, I have no control over them, and it makes me angry, so I'm going to communicate to the American people how angry I am openly.
But doesn't your argument depend on like a rational actor model, which is like, you know, political science 101, that his tweets are well thought out with a plan? I mean, they could just be he's annoyed and he's just venting.
And I'm sure maybe that's why Mueller's looking at it, which is he trying to influence through the tweets? And my point is, when you have the ability to influence other ways, which is call them and fire them or call them not to testify, then tweets are a weak version of that.
He has done all of these things, though, right? He called the FBI director into the White House, had a meeting with him, and asked him if he could make an investigation go away. Okay, that's an in-person meeting. He has called other individuals and tried to put pressure on this investigation. His tweets are a piece of it. He tweeted at Director Comey after he was fired that there might be tapes. That was potentially intimidating a witness. He has gone after Andy McCabe, the former deputy director of the FBI, in both publicly and privately. So his tweets
when you put it all together, it sounds so negative.
And
I realize that if you're going to go to, say, a jury, which won't happen, but if you're going to go to a jury, you may want evidence to say, look at this pattern. But the idea that a tweet complaining that I can't control the Justice Department, and I'm complaining about it publicly to the American people, is somehow obstruction of justice.
I cannot imagine a clearer case of someone in a position of authority trying to change the outcome of a legal proceeding than what we're watching. You know, to call people in and say, go easy on Flynn. What are we talking about? If that's not trying to change the outcome, that's the reason he's trying to do all this. And he has smeared, you know, his Attorney General. He smeared Comey. He smeared Mueller. You know, there's a long list. And that is a way to diminish public approval, public acceptance, public respect for the investigation. He's laying the groundwork.
Just like the Democrats did to Ken Starr. They wanted to lower his approval rating and lower his credibility during an investigation.
Demagogue whatever the outcome is if he doesn't like it. But there's just, you know, this is just, most of the time when you see obstruction, you have to dig for it. Here, it's just right out in front of us. You can't ignore it. It's just like, there's like, obvious.
Well, and the fact that it's public doesn't mean that it's not happening.
Yeah.
You know, most people, if they're trying to obstruct justice, might try and do it privately, which is, I think,
but the stories
point.
about Mueller publicly investigating or asking questions about public shaming. And what I'm saying is that particular part of it, publicly shaming somebody, and trying to denigrate an investigation publicly is not obstruction of justice.
You're taking issue with simply the headlines when the reality is we have a lot more content that goes behind it.
Also, he wouldn't be asking the people about public tweets, which he can read. He would be asking the people who were there at the time, what else was the president doing around that time, I assume.
Well, there's another piece of this, which is that part of what he's doing through the tweets is trying to put pressure on the Attorney General to resign. And what is the effect of that? The effect of Jeff Sessions resigning is that Rod Rosenstein no longer has to be the individual in charge of the Russia investigation, overseeing the special counsel. And that goes to the president's efforts to try to derail this
He's going to put pressure on him to resign through Twitter instead of calling him and firing him.
Well, this is why Mueller wants to talk to the president. Because if he's going to think about obstruction, he needs to know the president's
break in. Just ahead, inside the televised session with President Trump and lawmakers at both parties, where the president seemed to take not just one, but several Democratic positions on gun control, telling some of the Republicans in the room that they're afraid of the NRA. A remarkable moment. We'll talk to a Democratic senator who was there.
We have to do something about it.
I've seen them all. Big, small, wide, slim. Which is why at Men's Warehouse,